Right, time for us to chat up here for a little while. Mark Butcher's in the third man chair. Owen's alongside me. That was really refreshing, wasn't it, to hear Johnny talk there? I mean, 3 formats is a challenge for the players, and Ben Stokes has decided that he wants to give up for ODI cricket to play Test cricket and T20 cricket. But it's nice to hear him wanting to carry on enjoying the game.
Yeah, I get great energy from Johnny in that interview. He's clearly comfortable in his own skin. He talked about the struggles of being cooped up all that time during COVID and going from bubble to bubble and the extra pressure that might have had on his game. But he's right on top of his own game at the moment. We've witnessed that during the test matches, not quite as much in the white ball, but he seems very content at the moment. And Johnny Bairstow in that type of headspace is dangerous for any team around the world. So it's great to see him laughing and joking on the morning of a game.
We spoke in some detail, didn't we, prior to the game in Manchester about scheduling and expectations, and I think Ben Stokes said it's unsustainable, the schedule. I know you gave your view the other day. Just where are you with that? It's tricky, isn't it, for the players, because they want to play as much as possible, but some feel that it's just, you look at Quinton de Kock. Quinton de Kock has retired from Test match cricket so that he can play ODI cricket and T20 cricket. For some it's just play 2.
Yeah, it is, and it's proving a winning formula regardless of the decision that individuals are making, because they're making the best possible decision for themselves. Ben Stokes is 31, sadly has to retire and sacrifice one format of the game, a format that he really enjoys playing, has won a World Cup, but he feels that that's the right way and best way to play, to make the most of his career. He talks about the longevity he wants to display. He mentioned Jimmy Broad, or Stuart Broad and James Anderson. Jimmy Broad, what a name. But it's great to see. Quinton de Kock is another good example. The demands on each individual are being, I suppose, exacerbated in different formats, and people are not just turning up and playing now. They're wanting to contribute more. They're thinking more about the future, which is really good, really healthy for the game. But there is one format of the game that is suffering, and for various different players, it's different formats. And at the moment, for Johnny Bairstow, thankfully, he's really enjoying the demands, the 3 formats, I suppose, impact on his life and his body. He's been very lucky with injury over the years. He's only 32 years old. So hopefully that mindset and that energy that he showed in the interview continues.
We spoke, I think, for the best part of an hour, didn't we, down at Manchester, discussing it with Butch and Ravi and Polly and others about the direction it should go in the future, where it is right now. It was very real, very realistic views, obviously, and slightly depressing, because I think there was the overall view that perhaps ODI cricket was going to get pushed to one side, and perhaps things should have been done at an earlier date in terms of letting franchise cricket dominate as much as it has. I want to sort of have a slightly more positive look at it, more positive spin on it, in the 3 formats in some ways kind of complement each other. We saw that wonderful innings from Ben Stokes in 2019, and I think post that innings he said he kind of, T20 cricket played a major role in that. So is that the plus side to what we're talking about, that actually players have sort of learnt so much and bring it into the other formats?
Yeah, I think it is. I think certainly when you look at the longer format, the impact that T20 and 50 over cricket have had, particularly on people's batting, it's meant that sides don't have long tails anymore. People work harder on the batting, they train better, but also the scoring rate has gone up. The 4 test matches that England have played in this summer so far have been enthralling to watch. And speaking to the guys that have playing in, it's been extraordinary. The level of energy they brought, the different mentality, the change of mindset that Ben Stokes, the Test captain, and Brendan McCullum, the England Test coach, have brought it into that changing room. It's just a complete breath of fresh air, and it's turned Test cricket on its head. So that's a huge positive when it comes to, I suppose, the future of the game. Because if you look at all 3 formats, we continue to do loads for T20 cricket because it grows the game and it introduces a younger age into the game. The 100 is also does that and achieves that. 50 over cricket has a World Cup every 2 to 3 years, maybe 4 years. But actually, when we talk about Test match cricket and sustaining it and making it better, there's actually very little done about it. So certainly the contribution throughout the formats that you've alluded to has had a knock-on effect to Test match cricket, and I think an extremely positive one that, as an England fan, I love watching. And I can't wait for the Test matches against South Africa next month. So it's definitely having a positive spin on things.
Where are you with Test cricket? I mean, Ravi made the point, I think, in that hour chat, he said just 6 teams, quality over quantity. It's hard to grow the game, though, with six teams when you're trying to expand and give everyone an opportunity. Where do you sit with that now and moving forward?
Yeah, I think Ravi gave a very dramatic but very real painted picture of what Test match cricket will look like down the line. And I think we need to address it in the same way we would address T20 cricket and 50-over cricket. What is it bringing to the game? T20 cricket is bringing growth and energy and introducing kids, like I mentioned. 50-over cricket is bringing a full day's entertainment, and 50-over cricket has actually moved closer to T20 cricket in the way that it is being played. So it is full-on entertainment. When you look at the future of Test match cricket, you need to think about how often it's being played around the world, by how many teams. So new Test playing nations, Ireland for instance, and Afghanistan, how many Test matches are they playing throughout the year and over the course of the Future Tours program? Because in all honesty, a Test match is extremely expensive to host. And outside of us, Australia, India, really financially viable Test match venues and hosts, very little countries actually produce money in hosting Test matches. And that puts a real squeeze on things when you're either trying to grow the game or make it interesting or sell the game better. So I certainly think Ravi's point was real, and he's probably looking maybe 15 years, 20 years down the line and fast-forwarding everybody's thinking. And it's a pretty bleak sight unless something is done about it, and something needs to be done.
Well, come on, I'm going to put you on the spot now. What needs to be done? I mean, when we spoke with Ath was, again, very real and saying that perhaps back in 2008, IPL, perhaps other franchise crickets, at that point there needed to be an awareness of where this was all heading in years to come, and he's saying that didn't happen. What could be done right now to make this a better landscape, if you like, for the cricketers and for the watchers, for those that are coming to watch?
I think that's the main point. You need to engage with the fans and supporters, make sure they're continuously coming through the gate and getting value for their ticket. We should never take our fans and supporters for granted. So creating a landscape where around the world people want to come and watch Test match cricket. So in my eyes, that needs to be as entertaining as possible, as engaging as possible. As mentioned, we're very lucky at home and in Australia where we go and we play Test matches or watch Test matches and see stands full, stadiums full. And it's a huge privilege to be able to do that. But it is not happening around the world, outside of the top 3 or 4 nations around the world, unless they are also touring. So there's a huge responsibility that comes with that. It means there has to be a shared value where people recognise that something has to be sacrificed. And that might mean England touring more where places they don't like touring, India touring more places they don't like touring. But we cannot have an instance where we're picking and choosing where we're touring and where we're going based on revenue, selfish revenue. I think it has to be spread around in order to certainly make Test cricket more sustainable.
Is that one of the big problems here? You mentioned revenues and sustainability. You've got India, Australia, England. Clearly the revenues, etc., are very different for those countries than many others. Is that the problem in some ways, that you're talking about some countries who are in a slightly different financial position, therefore perhaps don't need as much cricket, whereas others do, and you're trying to find, or the administrators are trying to find a way to accommodate all?
Yeah, I think that's quite a big issue. I think the other big issue is the biggest rivalry in cricket do not play Test matches against each other. India and Pakistan haven't played a Test match for at least a couple of decades. And when you have the biggest rivalry in your own sport, not playing against each other, that people look at the sport and think, well, why? The other two formats, they continue to play against each other in World Cups, albeit not bilateral series, but fans get to see that big game. They get to see that spectacle. And we're lucky, we play Australia a lot in the Ashes, which is our pinnacle. But I think outside, we have two big derbies around the world and only one of them plays. It's silly in many ways. And trying to sell a sport on the back of one big derby and then your main test match or your higher ranked test match teams that have revenue streaming in, pick and choose where to travel. So I think certainly something has to change in order to distribute and fund test matches around the world. Because it'd actually be interesting to speak to some of the other test-playing nations, and do they want to play test match cricket? Because in many ways for them it is a burden. It eats away into their revenue stream and potentially could create a lot of debt. So from the financial aspect, you have to look at it, because otherwise we'll see what we're seeing happening with players. Something will get squeezed, and you could see very quickly a debt accumulating, and then over the course of, say, 10 or 15 years, the biggest consequence, and very few people are playing test match cricket.
Well, you talk about things getting squeezed. I think Butch is with us in the third man chair. I think the other day, Butch, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you said that ODI, you fear for ODI cricket now, international cricket in this format. You stick by that, and do you think at some point we're not going to be seeing ODI cricket being played?
I guess the point that I was making was that in this country, I was trying to be very sort of England-centric in that answer, because the priorities for different nations around the world are completely different. Test matches here are still very much sort of like big money spinners. First-class cricket is still, despite the fact that that people would say it's being pushed to the margins of the season, it's still very well supported, and the players love it, and they want to then progress from playing first-class cricket to play test matches for England. So in this country, test matches are still very much the top of the tree. Now, that might change. Because we now are not playing any first-team, real first-team 50-over cricket, at some point, the amount of players like Owen and myself, and yourself, who grew up playing 50-over cricket, as very much a staple part of the diet of our cricketing upbringing, a lot of players are going to have stopped doing that by now, or at least the ones that are playing it are kind of playing it, but looking at the 100 and thinking, I'd rather be doing that instead. And then, therefore, the game sort of loses its momentum. It loses its reason. It doesn't have. There is no sort of aspirational side to the 50-over game, as and of itself. Yes, you want to play for England, but the chances of doing that are much heightened if you're playing in the 100 or if you're playing T20 cricket, not if you're turning out for Surrey or Hampshire in an invisible 50-over competition. So that's why I'm not saying that because that's what I want. I'm saying that because that's how it is going to end up looking, and it would be a great shame. I still think that the one resource that we are not rich in here in the UK is time, right? Our season, really and truly, despite the fact that April, the weather has been decent to us in March and April, and that we're able to push things up to the very end of September, which is always extremely risky. Our season's really only 4 months long. We've got 18 centres of excellence, I suppose, if you want to call them that, in the county scene. We have an enormous amount of cricket that needs to be played in a tiny, tiny space of time. You can't push the seasons out to 6 months like you can in other parts of the world. We just don't, we're not fortunate enough to have the weather to allow that to happen. And so always there's a compromise. You have to compromise. You have to look at it and go, okay, what do we want to get out of this? What is that? What are our priorities here? And at the moment, it appears to me that our priorities are test matches and short format cricket, right? Now, there is a way of doing that whereby you can keep the priorities as 20, 50, and test match, but the decision has been made that isn't the case. So I'm merely talking about what the decisions that are being made at a level far above our pay grades are sort of veering the game and pushing the game and forcing the game, almost railroading the game away from 50-over cricket. And some people will find that very upsetting, but that's the reality of it, I think.
What about the players, guys? And we talk about the administrators and where the game should be. What about the players? I mean, you've just come out of you're still going to play, I think, in the 100. You've just come out of the game. Other players, difficult question. Are a lot of the players, or what percentage of the players, shall I put it like that, still aspire to want to play for England in Test match cricket? Now, if you look back generationally, our generation, Butch and I, it was all about Test match cricket. Are the players in the county dressing room still, or how many of them are still saying, yeah, that's still the pinnacle for me, or is it one-day cricket?
I think a good indication was this morning. Sam Curran gave a great interview with Michael Atherton, and Sam's 24 years old and hasn't played or been involved in Test matches, mainly due to injury since last year. And he is desperate to get back in. He said he still has Test match aspirations. What he sees Brendan McCullum and Ben Stokes and their team producing, he wants to be a part of. And that's a really strong sign. Now, the thing that worries me is the change room downstairs are the best players in the country. They will always be fine. They will always have a choice and pick and choose what they do. They can shoot for the stars and try and play Test match cricket. They might fall short, but they'll play county cricket and they'll play 100 and they'll play IPL and various different things. The thing that worries me is if you're not so good and you're sitting in a county change room and you're looking at opportunities around the world that you can get involved in, expose your game, try and learn a little bit more, that will catapult you into the England change room. Because up until then, you're playing with 300-400 players up and down the country. Things are extremely competitive. Standard of cricket is very high, and opportunity is very rare. So they're the guys that we need to make sure are okay and see an avenue through to playing either Test match cricket if they want to play tests, or in the white ball setup. Because certainly your best players will always be your best players, I believe. But it's the guys that just fall short or potentially develop a little bit later in your career than the natural progression of an England cricketer. So it's, Butch mentioned it at Old Trafford. Players now have more options to play anywhere around the world 52 weeks of the year. And when people have options and choices, it makes each and every choice that you make moving forward a little bit more challenging.
We're going to continue to chat here, but our viewers listening on the main event channel are going to move on. They're going to go to the Grand Prix, the French Grand Prix. So enjoy race day. We've seen practicing and qualifying, so it's race day on now, and main event viewers will be going there very, very short. Right, that's where we are. So that's good news, actually. Umpires are out there, ground staff are out there. The full covering is on, but no umbrellas, and weather's definitely improved. It still looks a little bleak in the distance, but as far as the short term is concerned, Richard Kettlebury there, and a few hardy souls just sticking it out, and understandably, because the rain's never really been that heavy. Hopefully the covering will come off at some point. They may just be scouring the radar to see whether there's any more coming, but as far as the short term is concerned, as I say, things have improved quite dramatically over the last 10-15 minutes. So 119 for 2 if you weren't with us earlier. South Africa have won the toss. And, Quinton de Kock 69 from 55. He's with Aidan Markram, and a wicket apiece for Adil Rashid and David Willey. So that's where we are right now. I was just going back to that conversation. I mean, when you think of perhaps when Butch and I played, one-day cricket was fine. It was important to play. It was a great game that we enjoyed playing, but it was always seen as sort of very much underneath the Test match game, and you couldn't sort of put your head up above the parapet and say, actually, do you know what, I quite enjoy playing one-day cricket. I'm not that fussed about Test match cricket. If you did, you were sort of sent to the gallows and never to be seen again. But I sort of sense that's a little different now. I mean, it's okay to be fine with one-day cricket, and you don't always have to aspire to play the Test match game.
Yeah, I actually think it's been turned on its head completely. It's actually rarely you get a player coming through now that wants to pigeonhole himself in one format. Majority of players want to play all three. Aspiring to play Test match cricket is the pinnacle. But I think when a player does come through wanting only to play one format, it does apply a little bit more pressure than necessarily you want to early on in your career, whether it is red ball or just white ball. you naturally try and find out more about your game and progress, make as many mistakes as you can, learn as many times as you can, as quickly as you can. And around the world, having experienced travelling and playing in franchise cricket, that certainly did that for me. Being exposed, all of a sudden every game was on TV that you played. It wasn't a case of you'd go back and play 5 or 6 games at Middlesex and none of it would be on TV and nobody really cared apart from your own fans and family and supporters. You can get swallowed up a little bit, but more exposure and more responsibility certainly leads to better learning within that.
One I wanted to ask you, Owen, was that I know you made a decision that you were going to stop playing first class cricket, and I often wondered, I often think about Alex Hales in this. What does a professional cricketer do, an English professional cricketer do in the summer when still the majority of time is taken up in 4-day games? How do you keep yourself sort of up and with it, waiting for the white ball stuff to come around? It can't be just playing golf.
A lot of it is playing golf. I do spend a lot of time at racing tracks around the country.
But I mean,
is
there an issue with sharpness? I mean, do you feel, because I think perhaps in your situation a little different because you're much more experienced and a lot further down the line in terms of your career. But for a guy, say it was Sam Curran, for example. I mean, I don't think he will, but say Sam Curran decided at the age of 24 that he was going to stop playing 4-day cricket and just concentrate on the white ball stuff. Would that be difficult? Would it be tough to kind of maintain your standards?
No is the answer, and I think one of the other things that's changed amongst that is that you play 12 months of the year regardless if you're an international cricketer or not. So you use Sam Curran just because you mentioned him as an example. If Sam Curran stopped playing red ball cricket tomorrow, he would play in the T20 games against South Africa next week. He would play in the 100 in August. He would go to Pakistan with England white ball team. September, November he would go to the T20 World Cup in Australia. December he could play in the Big Bash. January he could play in South Africa. February he could play in Pakistan. March he could play in March is Pakistan. February is the Emirates League. March, April, May. May you can go to the IPL and bang, June back at home in England. Yeah. So you can pick and choose what you want to play. Given the player that he is, he would demand, his phone would be ringing off the hook with teams wanting for him to play. And equally, there are other tournaments that I've just not mentioned that fall in behind or in and around those particular ones. So you don't sit around for the 5 months in the winter like we used to. I remember when we were 6-7 month contracts and you could do what you want in the winter, go get work experience, but it was all off your own accord. But certainly things have completely changed, and like you said, players have more choices now than ever, and we have a responsibility within the game, certainly within England, the ECB and the ICC globally, to make players want to play your format for your country, and you have to make it as glamorous and appealing as it was for us to play test match cricket or 50 over cricket. Yeah, I think that's going to be the challenge.
Yeah, I mean that's a brilliant answer to the question, isn't it? I mean, if people out there might not realise that there is quite so much cricket to be played. I mean, there's the CPL there. So, say for example, that there wasn't the series in Pakistan at the back end of September, then he'd go off and do that. So it's wall to wall, absolutely. And therein lies the issue for formats for particularly for international cricket. The players are okay. I mean, this is the thing. In the old days, all of the power was held by the administrator. All the power was held by people who were picking teams for international cricket. If you wanted a decent gig, particularly if you were English, because England players were not welcome in first-class cricket in Australia or pretty much anywhere else for that matter. And that might just have been because we weren't any good. But nowhere else had that tradition of having overseas players over in the same way that we do here in the Northern Hemisphere. That's just kind of that's just the way that it always was. But right now, the players hold more power, and I'm not saying this in a way that means it's wrong or in a begrudging way at all. But they have the ability to pick and choose what they want to do and when they want to do it. And so that the emphasis has never been stronger on those that make the decisions, that set up the schedules, that share out the funds that the ICC gather in from their tournaments and whatever. If you want a thriving international program that includes the 3 formats of the game as they are played in international cricket, then you have to make it financially viable for the players of those from those nations to want to represent their country in international cricket. And it is utterly incumbent upon the centre and the richest nations in order to make that happen. If you have no interest in making that happen, then fine, but be honest about it. You know, don't pretend that you're kind of, we're a bit worried about this format disappearing, or Ireland not getting too many test matches, or Sri Lankan players not being paid for 6 months. No. You either want to do something about it, or you're honest about it and go, doesn't matter, let it go to the wall. They can just play in the odd T20 or 50 over World Cup.
Realistically, do you guys think that international cricket can thrive, albeit 2 formats or 3 formats, if franchise cricket continues to develop on a global stage? And therefore, as you were making the point, you know, players can just go from January to February to March to wherever. How do you think that's going to have an impact on the quality of international cricket?
I don't think that we've seen the full impact of it yet. I think countries are doing an incredible job to engage with that younger version of yourself that grew up and dreaming of playing for your country. So it's the one advantage that countries have over franchises. If you get hold of that within a setup and within a young player's mind, I mean, you know, all he wants to do is fulfill his dream in playing for his country in whatever format that is possible. I don't think that's going to change for a while. And if it does, trying to wrestle it back, I think it'll be very, very difficult. So that's the one thing that playing for your country has over playing any other cricket around the world. And I think nations have to work with that. Otherwise, it just comes in incredibly difficult. You know, be forward thinking, come up with plans and initiatives and strategies that are better in many ways, because they create longevity. They will stay upbeat with the game. They will produce our finest cricketers. But also with that, you can come to our original point about it. It is all about the fans. It is about paying a ticket and getting full value. They want to see the best players. So it just makes sense to be able to do that.
And I guess we're seeing instances of that where that's questionable now. I mean, you've got a T20 side playing in one part of the world. You've got a Test match side playing at the same time in a different country or in a different competition or against a different side. And then you think, like you say, of the supporters and the fans. They're saying, hang on, I want to see Ben Stokes playing, or I want to see Joss Buttler playing, but actually he's not. He's rested because he's playing in another game. So you have to feel or fear a bit for the fans and the supporters that are sort of putting all the money into the game, or helping put money into the game, but they're not getting perhaps what they were hoping for.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think I watch a lot of sport all around the world, and one of the things that actually in cricket you pay it. So I grew up as a Brian Lara fan, a Graham Thorpe fan. You buy a ticket, you go see England play or the West Indies play. Brian Lara might not bat that day if it was a test match. Graham Thorpe might not bat that day if it's a test match. So it does limit the value immediately with the format. Potentially something that we could look at is possibly playing 2 games in one day. So your ticket, a bit like finals day, you can go and watch 3 or 4 of the country's best domestic players alongside some overseas players. Also go and support your team. And there's completely full value in the ticket. It's a fantastic day. Some great cricket played. The ball travels everywhere. And as a result, it's just great entertainment. So it then isn't just cricket. It's actually fantastic sport, which I'm a big fan of. I think the Americans do it unbelievably well. They do it NFL, NBA, hockey, National Hockey League as well. It is pure entertainment, and it engages both with the purist and the sports fan. So I think we can learn lessons from that.
Okay. Well, there is definitely improving. You can see the covers are still on at the moment, but the latest we've heard is that we're going to get an inspection at 1:45, so that's around about 20 minutes from now. We're going to get a full inspection, so that hopefully means that we're going to get some cricket at some point in the next little while or so. It definitely looks better yonder as well, definitely looks better in the distance, so hopefully the worst of the weather has come and gone. they will come off shortly, the covers. And as I say, that inspection in around about 20 minutes from now. 119 for 2, South Africa. I think we've spoken for quite some time. I don't know if that's eaten into our hour or not that we had in lieu before we start losing overs. I suspect it will be way beyond once we get out there. So it looks like it's going to be a shortened game. South Africa won the toss and decided to bat first. So maybe Josh Butler at the toss had this in mind a bit, because he said he was happy to bowl first. So that will play out as we get throughout the afternoon. Right. Well, let's say good news. So whilst we sit and wait for any more news and any updates, let's take you back to the first game, which was scorchingly hot down at Chester Street. And South Africa, well, they had a very strong-looking batting lineup. In fact, at the top of the show, I remember highlighting with the guys just how good their numbers were and how good they were against spin. And England, likewise, very strong-looking lineup. Bryden Carson, Matthew Potts was on debut down at his home ground in Chester Street. So it was South Africa who won the toss. They decided to bat first.